This is the Game Boy Color. It was released back in 1998, which means that this gaming device is about 25 years old now. In this video, I want to take a closer look at this device, talk about some of the specs that it had when it first released, and how far we've progressed since its release. So let's get started. Quick thanks to Adobe for sponsoring this video. More on Adobe later. What's up guys, my name is Michael and welcome back to the Tweet and Tech YouTube channel, and today we are going to be taking a look at the very old Game Boy Color. So released back on October 21st, 1998, the Game Boy Color was actually the successor to the original Game Boy. Now you can probably tell just from looking at it, but this thing is pretty ancient, at least as far as technology goes. 25 years is quite a long time in the technology world. Although it does feature a colored display, hence the Game Boy Color, it did not even have a backlit screen on this. So if you want to play it, you either have to buy an accessory to attach a light to it, or you had to play in a very well lit room. Now it did use a TFT LCD display with a resolution of, get this, 160 by 144. To give you some context, a 1080p video is 1920 by 1080p. So this literally means you're using a 1440p screen to play your games, which 25 years ago that was fine, but it's kind of weird to think about nowadays when we have 4K videos, 4K gaming. It's just quite a big difference. Now, pricing wise, it's actually even more interesting. So this thing at release cost $69.99 in the US, which is about the price of a modern day AAA video game. So back in 1998, you could get an entire handheld gaming console, and today you can get a video game, which hopefully you play for just as long, but just kind of interesting seeing the price difference there. Or I guess not really a difference, the price similarities. Now, $70 might sound kind of cheap, but even in today's dollars, it's still a relatively affordable price for a handheld gaming device. So I plugged $70 into an inflation calculator, and in 1998, $70 is worth about $118 in 2022. We're approaching 2023, depending on when you're watching this video. So, you know, roughly $120 for a gaming device in today's dollars. There's not a ton of gaming devices that you can find for that price. I believe even the lowest level Nintendo Switch, I think, is around $200. So 120 bucks in today's dollars for a gaming device, not too bad. So the $70 price tag actually seems relatively affordable back in 1998. So let's talk more about some of the specs of the actual Game Boy Color. And in my opinion, this is when things get really interesting because you get to hear about all the old technology and hardware. But before we do that, I do want to thank the sponsor of today's video, Adobe. So one of the inspirations for this video was an article that the Adobe Acrobat team actually recently published. So they have a short, easy to read article that compares a 1980s supercomputer to today's modern day smartphone. So one of the things Adobe talks about in the article is the Cray 2 supercomputer. And it's actually the computer that put Neil Armstrong on the moon. So I'm sure you've heard of it if you've been on the internet any time in the last couple of years, whether it's Reddit, Twitter, whatever. The supercomputers that they used to put Neil Armstrong on the moon, they're now less powerful than your modern day smartphone. So the smartphone that you're watching this video on or that's in your pocket is actually more powerful than the computer that put Neil Armstrong on the moon. And it's not more powerful by a little bit, it's more powerful by about 5,000 times, which is absolutely ridiculous to think about. Another thing that's really interesting, in my opinion at least, is that Cray 2 supercomputer, it weighed over 5,000 pounds. Now, for comparison, an iPhone 12 weighs less than 6 ounces. One of the reasons for this is just because the world is going completely digital, and that's what Adobe is an expert in the professional world. So they can turn manual document processes into effective digital ones with Adobe Document Cloud. And Adobe Document Cloud features the world's leading PDF and e-signature solutions. With Adobe Document Cloud, you're able to connect to your PDFs anywhere in the world and share them with anyone as well. So it's a pretty interesting article to read about. I'll be sure to leave a link in the description below where you can go read the article and check it out more. And once again, big thanks to Adobe for sponsoring this portion of the video. So as far as the CPU actually powering the Game Boy Color, this thing actually used an 8-bit processor. So it was actually a processor made by a company called Sharp, and it was considered a hybrid processor from the Intel 8080 as well as the Zilog, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, Zilog Z80. Basically, it was a super old processor and it can't really do much nowadays, but at the time it could run a handheld video game console, which is kind of cool. Now, if you're wondering how this thing is powered, the main source of power was two AA batteries. So there's no rechargeable batteries here, there's no USB-C, you just need two good old AA batteries, and that's gonna get you about 10 hours of gameplay. There was a DC in port on the bottom of the actual Game Boy Color. I believe this could be used to connect a power source to it, Correct me in the comments if I'm wrong, but I think you could plug a cable into this and you could actually power it without batteries. If I'm not right on that, be sure to let me know in the comments down below, but I'm pretty sure that's what it was for. Now, one thing that's kind of a positive, I guess you could say, for the Game Boy Color in terms of today's technology is it's actually incredibly light. It only weighs about 4.9 ounces, so it's actually a lot lighter than some modern day smartphones, and generally people want their technology to be a little bit lighter. You know, you don't want to be carrying around a phone that's 2 pounds heavy or anything. Now, as far as memory goes, you get a whopping 32 kilobytes here in the Game Boy Color and about 16 gigabytes of VRAM. So most computers come with 8 to 16 gigabytes of RAM nowadays. I've seen some with even higher, so it's not even comparable compared to what you get nowadays with memory. And this is also different. Storage-wise, you actually get nothing. All the storage was done on the actual cartridges themselves. So there's no hard drive here. There's obviously no SSD. Everything is stored on the actual cartridge itself. There is no storage. Now, taking a look around the actual device, it's pretty simple. Obviously, you could choose between a few different colors. The one I have here is the purple flavor, or grape, whatever you want to call it. And you do have a control pad here, often referred to kind of as a D-pad nowadays, and it has like kind of 8 different directions you can push it in: up, down, left, right, and then kind of at different diagonals. You do have just a B and A button, and that's pretty much it. You got the D-pad, you got the B and A button. That's how you control the game. You do have a start and select button to do various different things like start the game or pause the game, but really the main controls you were using was that control pad and the B and A button. It's a pretty simple device. There is obviously a speaker grill for output here, and then you have that fantastic 4K screen, or 144p screen. I believe it's about 2.3 inches, so pretty small screen, but it's colored. Not backlit, but it's colored because it's the Game Boy Color, obviously. Now, taking a look back to the bottom of the device next to that DC port we talked about earlier, you do see something else that you don't see on a lot of technology nowadays, and that's a 3.5 millimeter headphone jack. So that's kind of nice. If you had headphones, you could connect it to this and play it without other people hearing you around here. No Bluetooth though. You cannot connect Bluetooth headphones to this device. Now on the side of the device, you do have a toggle power on and off switch. And on the other side of the device, you have a volume kind of slider. And you also have I believe this is a serial IO port. So this is, I believe, what was used to connect a variety of different accessories. So earlier in the video, I mentioned, I believe you could buy a light that could attach to the actual Game Boy Color, so you could play it in a dimly lit room instead of a well lit room. Full disclosure here, I never actually had a Game Boy Color. This is actually my wife's, so I had to do a bunch of research for this video, but I'm pretty sure that port was used just for a bunch of different accessories. Again, if I'm wrong, be sure to correct me in the comments down below. And while you're down there, be sure to thumbs up the video so it helps grow my channel. And if you're into these type of videos, consider subscribing. I'm going to be doing more retro tech videos. We also have a retro tech video on the iPod Touch 2G as well as the Game Boy Micro. So if you're interested in those, be sure to check them out. But back to the Game Boy Color, of course. Now, as far as the actual games here, there was quite a long lineup of games. Of course, you could use your Game Boy Color cartridges or Game Boy cartridges to actually play these games. And on occasion, you would need to blow in them to get them to work properly. The only cartridge we have here to display is this Tom and Jerry game, but it's kind of interesting to look back at these cartridges. It's kind of similar to what the Nintendo Switch uses nowadays, except for not similar at all. It's just much bigger and much older technology, but I mean, it's still a cartridge in a way. Now, people do still sell a lot of these Game Boy cartridges on eBay. So if you have one of these laying around and you want to play some games, you can go on eBay and buy some. Speaking of eBay, you can actually buy an entire Game Boy Color on there as well. So it ranges from about $50 to $100. Depending on kind of the condition of it, the color that it is. They do have some special edition ones that sell for over $500, which is pretty crazy considering it was only a $70 device. That's a pretty good return on your investment. So if you're interested in buying one, or if you have one laying around that you want to get rid of, they are still selling and they are still available for sale. Do let me know in the comments down below if you guys did have a Game Boy or a Game Boy Color. And if you're interested in more retro tech videos, be sure to subscribe to the channel. Again, we have one on the iPod Touch 2G as well as the Game Boy Micro, which are both two very interesting pieces of technology. Thank you again to Adobe for sponsoring this video. And if you want to check out their article comparing a 1980s supercomputer to a modern smartphone, be sure to look for that in the description down below. I'll leave a link to that article. Other than that, guys, thank you so much for watching this video and have a great rest of your day.